Good evening, everybody. The time, I'm going to call this meeting to order. The time is 7 o'clock on Monday, June 10, 2024. I'd like to call this Heritage Advisory Committee meeting to order. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our newest member of the committee, Rocco Morcillo. Thank you for being here. Next is appointment of committee vice chair. Nominations are open for the position of vice chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee for the remainder of the two-year term, 2023 to 2024. Do we have any nominations? Are there any nominations?
Well, I'd like to nominate. Well, before we go to nominations, I'd like to ask to take the floor for a second, like to ask a question, if you don't mind. So through the chair we don't have, Adam, can our terms of reference, does or not our terms of reference state that we have a council representative as the membership? It does not.
No, through my understanding, a vice chair can lead a meeting.
So we're going to move ahead without a council representative, is what you're saying?
It's not my decision.
But a decision at council hasn't been made about either appointing a chair hasn't been made. But we're going to move ahead with a vice chair, even though council hasn't made that decision.
For a chair, vice chair and chair are two different roles.
I know, but I'm talking the chair specific. So council hasn't made a decision on the chair.
Correct.
And if I'm correct, we haven't had a vice chair for 2 meetings. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay, I just wanted that on record. Thank you.
So I believe there was a nomination from John. You put forward a nomination for, you put forward a nomination?
Yes, for Bob Roberts.
Are there any other nominations? And nominations are now closed. May I please have a mover and a seconder for the motion that Bob McRoberts be elected as vice chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee for the remainder of the two-year term, 2023 to 2024. Moved by Cynthia and seconded by.
I can second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I'll call the vote.
Should I leave the
I'll-
room?
It's put your head down in the back. You probably do that at school.
All in favor? That carries. So I will now pass the chair.
I'm gonna sit in this.
Bob. Start off with land acknowledgement. Thank you very much.
Gee.
At the moment, I'll say thank you very much, folks. I'd like to welcome you all here, Rocco. On behalf of the committee, welcome. Councillor Weiss, thanks for joining us. It's appreciated that there is a member of council interested in what goes on at the Heritage meeting and is able to share that with others. The land acknowledgement. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with the lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty Number 13, as well as the Williams Treaty of 1923. a shared understanding of how the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Yeah. I'm just seeing here, minutes of the meeting, but I'm seeing here approval of the agenda. So, yeah, I think I'm okay. So moving through our agenda, the first would be number 3, approval of tonight's agenda. Could I get a motion to so move? Recognizing Cynthia, seconded by John Green. Those in favor of the agenda before us? Hands are all high. Those opposed? Motion carries. Declarations of pecuniary interest in nature thereof. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Number 5, receipt of the minutes. Could I please have a mover and seconder for receipt of the minutes of our meeting from April 8th? Moved by John, seconded by Cynthia. Glad you guys are here. Any discussion on those minutes? Oh, I do. Just a brief comment. And it's basically from me to Linda, but perhaps via Adam. I'm looking specifically at the Petch House considerations 7.1, page 3 of tonight's agenda. In the last sentence, the committee was generally supportive of the proposed use, but split on the use of the Heritage Reserve Fund as a funding source. And I can appreciate that there was lots of discussion for and against. I just wondered if it might help counselors in their deliberations and discussions if we could, at times, if not all of the time, include some of the details, perhaps like points for and against. So there were 2 sides being discussed, and yeah, we were split, but it might help counselors think just a little bit deeper to hear why there was some concern on spending the funds and why there wasn't some concern on spending the funds. So that's just my comment. I don't I don't expect every detail and every comment to hit the minutes, but perhaps a little bit on each side just to add a little depth to the wish and assumption that counselors do look at the minutes and discuss accordingly at their council meetings. Otherwise, those in favor of the motion on the floor to receive the minutes? No one?
Question, in your advice that came just now to, I believe, Linda, about to getting more detail, are you suggesting that we provide some detail now before we move on and accept the minutes? It seems a little back to front, but
I think if we did something now, the decision's going to be made by council before they would see the minutes from tonight's meeting.
because as I remember it, the discussion revolved around the Heritage Fund being used, $50,000 to provide steps and a new floor, the Patch House. And the other thing was the use of the Patch House, which was either going to be used for a wedding venue or whether it might be used for something else and moved to, in this case, the Hillary House property. They were the two main issues. That's as I remember it. But I know there was a push, if you will, to use it as a wedding venue, and that was the thing that was finally decided upon.
So my intent wasn't to reopen discussion, but Linda's taking notes. And I think I should probably preface this that my comment of giving examples on both sides rather than just saying split should be directed to the secretary of our meetings, not specifically Linda Bottles. But just the minute taker.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair. The minutes as presented are also then further reinforced through a staff report at the council level. That staff report, as I'm sure you know, was through community services and Robin McDougall's report regarding the Patch House, where there was more thorough discussion on what that language in particular was meant, being a split. In terms of the Heritage Reserve Fund being a funding source, why or why not? I do recall that being discussed at the council level, at least to some degree, but I can also appreciate.
I appreciate knowing that too. Thank you. So I think we still have to pass the motion to receive the minutes. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And we have an add-on to the agenda that was sent to us last week. We have a delegation for this evening. And I would like to welcome Christopher Watts to our table. Chris, feel free to.
Sure, Mr. Chair, I'm recognizing you have audience for one of your items for Mark Street. I'm totally happy taking the delegation moving later to the meeting. If you want to proceed to that, I might be pleasure.
That's appreciated. And do I need a motion to change the order? Okay. Is there any opposition to us dealing with 7.1 prior to delegations? Hearing no opposition, let's move on then to 7.1, and then we will come back to a delegation request. So 7.1. Memorandum from the Manager Policy Planning and Heritage Heritage Permit Application HPA 2024-03, specifically 23 Mark Street. We have, as per usual, two parts to the motion: that the memorandum regarding that application be received, and that the Heritage Advisory Committee comments regarding the application be received and referred to staff for consideration and further action as appropriate. Could we please have a mover for that motion, 7.1? Rocco, thank you. And seconded by John, thank you. So agenda-wise, we're on page 6 of 16. And I turn the floor over to Adam.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So this heritage permit application was for proposed rear garden suites at, as you mentioned, 23 Mark Street. There's staff's opinion that the proposed garden suite is generally modest in scale. It will also undertake a comprehensive zoning review, a preliminary zoning review prior to receiving any building permits on the structure as well. The owner has discussed as well, is also here tonight. And it has been confirmed that there is no proposed work being done to the primary heritage structure itself, as well as no tree removals. And ultimately, this heritage permit is here for the Heritage Advisory Committee to review and provide comments on prior to then proceeding to council for ultimate approval.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Adam, our staff member?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just have a question. Maybe I'm missing it. Where's the accessibility for the garden suite? There's no road at the back or laneway, it seems, unless I'm missing something.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So if you look at attachment 1, the first image, the site plan. So 23 Mark Street is accessed. Again, this is the access through the driveway. What we're seeing on the site plan would be relative to the bottom of that page is a driveway point, and then you can see a delineation of a proposed landscape walkway into the garden suite area.
You're talking about this one here.
Correct.
Okay, so this would be, so there'd be no road access. It would just be,
Only
thank
a
you.
private garage.
Okay,
Driveway, I should say.
yeah.
Any other questions for Adam? I have. What's the purpose of the garden suite?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would also invite the owner if you have any questions or sorry, any comments you want to provide, but the garden suite, to my understanding, would be what's classified as an additional residential unit. And this is part of the framework that's been introduced through the provincial government as well as a way of adding new suites to existing residential areas. And it would be a habitable unit in the rear of the property. As mentioned, the owner is also here to provide me further context.
Okay.
I can just add, we've got relatives in the community, family, so housing's getting more expensive. We believe it's creates an opportunity for us.
You can sit at the table if you like on this item.
I was gonna, state that in our opinion, like this is an emerging form of housing. And we've got parents in the community on both sides, my wife's side and mine, who are, ready to move out of the primary residence at some point. So there's some comfort in being able to offer them something that is in close proximity to us. And we've also got a young family as well. Housing is going to get more expensive. So this would just create options for us and, more housing for the community as well. And what we think is a responsible way that adheres to heritage. That's what we attempted to do anyway.
Any other comments, questions? I have a question. Go ahead, Rocco.
Is this like a board and batten, or what is the exterior material?
That is board and batten, yes.
Okay.
So on the house right now, on the property, that is a board and batten finish in the backyard, and then there's also a shed that is board and batten, so it's consistent.
I had a few comments. I can appreciate the purpose, and I would agree that house prices are crazy. In terms of comments for staff or council members to consider, I wonder what kind of precedents this might set for the Heritage District. Along the lines of, if your backyard is big enough, will everybody have one? To me, Heritage District, the houses tend to have larger backyards than new subdivision houses. And I think that's an attractive characteristic, attractive feature, the big yards, green spaces. I think one of the reasons when I was reading this, I'm thinking back, I suspect that many of the homeowners decades ago grew their own vegetables and probably needed bigger backyards to do so. The house that I live in used to have a big vegetable garden in the backyard. I'm not saying in support of vegetable gardens. I'm just wondering if not every house would want to do it. So I'm exaggerating, but does this set a precedent that many houses would like to have a house in their backyard? I'm wondering if neighbors need to be consulted or if they have any voice or if there's any concern. For example, there is a house in the district that has a large back extension, and one of the next door neighbors is deciding they will need to move because the sun doesn't shine where it used to in their backyard. I'm not proposing answers. I'm just proposing questions. 700 square feet. My daughter was in a condo in Markham that was 800 square feet. I have a neighbor that has a bunkie in the backyard, not that he lives in it, but it's much less the size. So just comments. Any further comments or discussion? John?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. With respect to the percentage that the current building occupies of the lot size, what is that size?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can provide that statistic in 1 second. If you don't mind me also commenting on some of the factors you brought up as well.
Please.
So with regards to the additional residential units, I mentioned the provincial legislation that does come into play to this regard as well through what was known as Bill 23, really encouraging this kind of development. And that would have an effect. But one caveat to that is we still have the right to enforce our zoning requirements. And I will give credit to the owner in this regard, in the sense that, yes, we still have to go through a preliminary zoning review, but from first glance, all zoning requirements are being met through this proposal. So your point about setting a precedent and certain other lots within the district, 23 Mark Street does benefit from having a fairly large lot in the sense that it can accommodate such a garden suite while maintaining the required zoning parameters as well. So that is something that, I can appreciate the comment, but from a zoning perspective, that is something that we can still enforce. And it wouldn't be a blanket that can necessarily apply to all the properties. 23 Mark Street happens to have, as shown on the site plan, a very deep lot that can accommodate this. And through the Heritage Conservation District plan itself, it actually specifically references Mark Street as being able to accommodate sort of rear developments, rear intensification. And it specifically does say Mark Street because it is specifically unique within the district as well, because of that very, very deep rear yard. And then getting to the lot coverage, that is available on the site plan attachment as well. If you look at the matrix section of that, the required lot coverage per our zoning bylaw is 15%, and the proposed is at 6.12%.
Anything further, folks?
What the zoning consider firefighter access? Like that seems so far to, like a fire truck if there was a fire in the back laneway, would they, like the zoning consider that distance?
Mr. Chair, so what happens at any building permit stages, there's obviously requirements to conform to the building code as well as the fire code. And then particularly for additional residential units, all those units have to be registered. They get registered through our building department, through fire services as well. So at that stage, there will be a more detailed review. My understanding is that wouldn't pose an issue, but a more detailed review would come dedicated to fire services.
So question through you, Mr.
Sure,
Chair, and
yeah.
perhaps this is not the right place to ask this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. When it comes to adding residential buildings on an existing lot, I'm assuming that impacts property taxes.
Yes.
And that would be ascertained during the whole zoning investigation process. Not the amount necessarily, but The reason why I'm asking is because the area of Aurora that I live in, a lot of people are putting in basement suites, calling them in-law suites, but they're renting them out. And they're renting them out, they're illegal suites. This obviously is not an illegal suite, but I'm wondering whether if we're going to start seeing more of this, I worry about density in terms of things like these roads, these neighborhoods are not intended to occupy double the amount of residents. I'm just wondering about things like density, and then the obviously this one would be a legal unit, but about the legality of some of these units and fire safety being the question, but also, you know, whether the sewage system, for example, is built to sustain that kind of activity if we're going to see a doubling of these residential properties and that are going to be more widespread because of this bill.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of good questions there. So I'll start off with the tax-based question. So as part of the registration, kind of coupling with the previous question with the requirement to register these units, then MPAC is the one who does the property tax assessment dollars for tax purposes. So that would occur, not necessarily upfront in this stage, but over the process of the property assessment. I believe you also then touched on servicing. For these units to come into play, and this is a requirement of Bill 23, the provincial legislation, it has to occur on a municipally serviced lot. This is a municipally serviced lot and there is capacity available.
Okay.
Strategically through the region as well, there is capacity intended for infill development of this nature.
Okay.
Where, you know, not to get too in depth into their calculations, but it's considered persons per unit. And you know, as a garden suite, it would generally speaking have less of a demand on the system as well. So that way geared towards the intensification capacity of the servicing system that is factored and that is accounted for, and they're raising that concern. And I believe those are your main points, but I forgot.
Yeah, just in terms of, you know, if we're doubling the amount of families living in an area, then we're doubling the amount of traffic, we're doubling the demand on all kinds of different infrastructure. So just, you know, also that area has a lot of children in it, increased traffic, things of that nature.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, one big factor, I can appreciate traffic and all those points, but another big consideration is parking, always as well. This site, again, would benefit from ample parking on that existing driveway portion. And things like traffic and just general volume, that is something that, you know, what this is classified in the planning world is generally as a gentle density. It is a way to add density, and again, not just specifically speaking about 23 March.
Right, in general.
That's a way of unlocking housing opportunities in a more gentle manner. But I can certainly appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So let's call the question. The motion on the floor is that the memorandum be received and that our comments as a committee be received and referred to staff. In favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
You.
And you don't have to stay,
Thank you
but I'm sure you'll be talking to Adam at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. So let's move to the delegation and Mr. Watts and Christopher, feel free to join us and welcome.
Thank
you. Is it going to show us some?
Yeah, I've got a small PowerPoint deck to.
Hope you've already communicated with Linda. Okay. Very good. So, Chris, it's all yours.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I'm just wanting to take an opportunity this evening to just refamiliarize the committee with the Doors Open Aurora project or event that just has kind of fallen into the ether. Linda, can we move to the, so I guess we've had an issue where the last 5 years, there has been no in-person Doors Open Aurora event. That just hasn't happened for obviously the 2020 and the 2021 period. That's self-explanatory. That is COVID, but starting in 2022, Richard Stouffville ended up getting back into in-person, and then beyond that, some other neighboring municipalities in the region have done it. The question is, what happened? Because there has been very little communication outwards to state why the changes occurred. And it's not like the community isn't being noticing. So this, it's a little bit more impactful to see it as a cartoon, Scott Johnson's kind of weekly cartoons in our local paper than an article. But it's not that the community is not noticing this absence. Can we get to the next? So when you kind of try and find answers and see what people are talking about socially on social media, there's the questions is like, is it going to happen this year? What's going to happen? And the only responses I was able to get on this were some possible theories put forward, which talk to date scheduling conflicts, which seemed weird. And obviously, I don't know who this person is that's commenting this way, but they were talking about potentially having an overlap between culture days and doors open, which is also factually incorrect because they're saying, oh, well, you know, culture day is end of September and doors open was always being held end of September. And I went through all of the dates between 2012 and 2019. And that's not the case. Doors open has always happened at end of August, except for 2012. It was kind of pushed up to July. But Culture Days always ends up end of September. So that can't be a reason. But another possible suggestion was, well, staff is just too busy. Community services is so busy with Town Square that this is just consuming too much time, and the decision is being made to kind of forego doors open. Which I also have problem kind of understanding that that could be the case because there hasn't been a lot of cross collaboration previously between departments to make doors open happen. Can we get the next one? So Town Square, it's interesting it gets mentioned because this is a rotating banner from the town website I took a screen grab of. And you'll notice how it's defined up there. A place for art, music, and culture, and it talks to future. There's nothing in there about heritage. There's nothing about our past. So if the Town Square activities that are being kind of planned are displacing our heritage and displacing our ability to showcase it, I think that's something this committee and obviously council and the entire community should be aware of. We get the next one. Especially considering the town recently adopted the cultural action plan. So if you drill into the cultural action plan, I pulled forward an objective that speaks specifically to heritage and tourism, about expanding it. So here we have doors open, an opportunity to do this, which has been done before, and we're not even doing that, let alone expanding it, which seems completely incongruent to what is being talked about or discussed at council and staff levels. We get to the next one. So I kind of am bashing my head against a door or a wall to try and get this changes to doors open happen. And it's not the first time I've been at this committee. I was doing a delegation back in 2012 and one in 2013 about changes to the program and how there were certain aspects being missed. So I'm here tonight to try and kind of walk you through a couple pieces of those in hopes that it kind of sticks if we're going to see doors open Aurora return. So one is not every go and every attempt at a event is a success just because of the nature of holding it. So far, when this has occurred, there's always been an event report. And it basically works out to KPIs that are as reduced as a single, oh, how many people went through a threshold. There really isn't anything there about how long do people stay on average. There's nothing there kind of giving you any meat or context. There's no data there speaking to exit interviews, if you can capture people. And so you can get some understanding of what was successful, what could be improved. It's just always rolled forward year after year the same. And I think if you don't have those, it's very hard to change your strategies, change your tactics based off the data you're accumulating, as opposed to just going, well, we'll just do the same thing we did last year, which seems to be what the course has happened for about a decade up until it kind of stopped. And if we're going to be looking at this program a little bit more holistically, the marketing is just horrible. Like right now on the town's website, if you go to the doors open section, it's a very short section, and the header for it has some tulips. Like there's no aspect to drilling in or jumping off points for people to discover. Like there's a missed opportunity there with that landing page. And it probably is because really there's no group here kind of driving it or making suggestions or looking after this. It's a placeholder piece and it's kind of getting glossed over. What I pulled forward was some social media that a historical society had kind of bravo and patted themselves on the back for being on the face of a pamphlet, or I guess it was a map handout. And I find it problematic that you have a singular building being showcased for the entire program. And I think if there are marketing materials that are going to happen, because it's exploring Aurora's rich history, it shouldn't be reduced down to a singular image. I think consideration should be made that the marketing equally weighs out all of the landmarks that basically are comprised within inside of the destinations, and favor is not given to one. So I guess I'm looking, and obviously the committee's already heard about issues with the chair and working it up to council, but I'm glad that Councillor Weiss is here, is getting the word out that the working group that had always been a subcommittee of this committee to do this gets reestablished for the purpose of doing this. If this is going to roll forward, it needs to have that. And then also, the next one, there's always been a silo effect with inside of this particular event, whereas it could really benefit from Shelley's department and having some kind of cross collaboration. So consideration there as to, can that be done? Is there capacity? If not, why? And have that discussion kind of arise. Oh. Blank slide. I'll try and get to where it was. Oh, as you're loading it up, I can speak to it. I was going to highlight upon the site selection criteria. So doors open, the way the concept is defined, and I'll just read it out. It says, it's a very simple concept. It's supposed to be buildings of architectural and historical significance, many of which are not normally open to the public, open their doors to visitors for a day or the weekend. And what's happened, at least for the decade that I listed, like somewhere between 2010 and all the way through 2019, is there were a lot of sites that were publicly always open. One I'll just cite is the public library. Public library is not normally open to the public. It doesn't seem like it is criteria for doors open. It might totally be a great site to include for culture days. Again, maybe not doors open, unless they offered some kind of programming where you could go into the bowels of the library and kind of get into an off space and work with, have some kind of reason for why it's there. That just has been missing from a lot of the site selection I've seen over the years of attending Doors Open. And the next one. So I guess the impetus to keep sites fresh. Also, there's a theme with Doors Open every year. And I've noticed that a decision is being made continuously that, well, it's an optional theme. We don't have to participate in it. But I mean, it's put out there for a reason. There should be an attempt made to embrace the theme and try and see what fits and maybe juggle around the sites to see if you can kind of make something kind of cohesive of it. And work with a cycle so that effectively you don't get the same sites one year and the same sites the next, that some sites disappear off, some sites come back. If it means that you overall you have less sites, so be it, but at least there's some interest to, not always in basically exhausting certain sites. So I want to kind of take a focus to why people go through Doors Open, and effectively the experience that they're looking for to be meaningful. So I'm going to do a contrast here. So this is a snippet from, 2010, Doors Open. This is kind of the media reporting on Doors Open. And here you have, I guess, a past heritage planner, and it focuses on a balloon animal, which, if you're going to do, turn the balloons into some, historical or architectural piece, I get that might be applicable, but I just want to understand, or kind of get this understanding of that's kind of what has happened. But if we go to the next one, if you're looking by comparison for City of Toronto, they open up the oldest post office in Toronto. And what experience that visitors there get is they get to use a quill and they fill out a letter. Then they postmark the letter and then they wax seal the stamp and they can actually mail it. So the experience isn't, oh yeah, I went and saw something old and it didn't stick. It's, oh, listen, and then there's some continuation of it. Oh, I got the, oh, what was that? You know, that you can have the conversations and it continues on. So it's night and day examples of what has been done and what can be done. And likewise from this is the tours are really a site. I guess they get lumped in and listed as a site sometimes. Is I think that some of the gem of Doors Open has been the tours. And I've put in some snippets of Mr. Hurd's tours over the years because they really stand out and people really resonate with having somebody take you to multiple sites. And it's not an easy job to do. It falls flat if you don't have the right person doing it. So I guess Aurora is kind of blessed to have Dave do his magic. But that there is just some appreciation, some understanding that that's kind of the piece that draws the stories home, as opposed to opening the doors, letting people walk through, click, oh, put it on a chart and go, hey, we had 5 more people than the previous year. That's not success. Having people want to come back because they heard a snippet of a story and it changes the next year, that's what I consider success. So I'm just here to get the committee to kind of think about this, change expectations, demand it however you need to, get it up through council, get it into staff, and just get Doors Open Aurora open, get it running, and just do better. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Do we have any questions for Chris or comments?
I have a question,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. So my knowledge of Aurora, I mean, I didn't grow up here, so I've been here for about 20 years. One of the things that I have observed is that there's a lot of historical buildings, but they are utilized as businesses. So they're open to the public, as you said. Are there enough locations that are not open to the public that would make something like this feasible? Versus are most of the really relevant historical locations already being used for something else, which would therefore render it not less feasible because they're places of business or people's homes, etc. So that's something I'm wondering.
I think it's a great question if you had a working group, so you could answer the question, right?
Okay.
My thing here is what happened to the working group? What happened to the whole idea of having that discussion? I mean, I know you guys collectively have been doing a lot of work with staff to just identify and designate, right? There's that piece of it. But even buildings that you're talking about that aren't designated, they might be perfect candidates for this. I know there was one, it was the, help me out, the, that's it, the orthodontist. Not everybody needs to go to an orthodontist, but there is a perfect way to go, oh, I didn't know we had this. Oh, that's really cool. I like Star Trek. And you can kind of, but you'd have to make an appointment and like that kind of thing. It's sure, it's not really into the architectural component of it, but from the experience standpoint, it makes, so I think those are the things where you have to start going and asking. The one thing from 2013 I had asked, and it was supposed to come back from staff, was there was trails open, existed. And staff was supposed to go and determine what the viability of that is. Was that ever come back as a report? Did anybody ever ask about it? Has anybody since then ever really thought about, would that fit with Aurora, considering we have a lot of trails? I think there's a lot there that can be discussed, but you guys need to have a vehicle and a report and a cycle to make that all work.
Dave?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Watts, for your presentation, except for the tour guy. We could have done without that. I just wanted to bring back a little history. I did speak to staff in regards to Doors Open. I believe it was last year. I won't say where that went, but last Doors Open, I kind of got a fire lit under myself, and thank you for mentioning the orthodontist that, here's a fellow who's got this massive, incredible collection of Star Trek and other memorabilia that, one of the greatest collections, I think, probably in the world. I mean, he's got, one of a kind pieces from the shows. And I went out and started knocking on doors and started reporting back to staff, trying to find new and unique locations. His was one of them. And one of the other things I advocated for, evidence-based, was to have doors open, moved. I got some pushback though. Moved to the last 2 weeks of August due to the fact that in Ontario at that time, and did some research, that it was a very highly traveled time for tourism, or everybody goes back to school, etc. If I recall, when we did the August time, we had record numbers. We had some exceptional site visits, even though the last time, Adam might remember that the weather started out quite horrific. And I think I had that tour that year was just over 100 people. The examples of those places I mentioned, like for example, Star Trek, I talked to staff about this. Maybe one of the reasons why, we have a lot of places that are businesses, but I know that what other communities have done with doors open too is, I call it layering. If you have a location and it's using almost like the Star Trek template, is whether you can assist the location with an addition of something. Could artifacts go in there? Could a display go in there? Could we help them? So you're not just going there to see 5 minutes to see the Lundy House. You're going to see the Lundy House and they've got this cool stuff. Something to talk about. I just want to add, like, that before talking to staff, I started banging the pavement for this year and had great interest from the Oddfellows. Their artifacts that they have, unbelievable. The New Connections Church was another one I was working on because I found a wonderful connection that would really fit for Black History Month. A story connected to that very building that just blew me away, and I thought that would be great. The Horton House, I went and spoke to them. And the Baldwin House on Mosley Street had interest from the owners that they would open their residence, focusing on an area that is easily walkable. The reason I hoping for walkable is if we had almost like a self-guided open doors walking tour, we'd actually be helping our green footprint, taking cars off the road to go see these sites. So, that's where I'm at with this, and I'm very disappointed that we haven't carried on with it probably more than anybody else.
Thanks, Dave. Not yet, Adam, but I'll get some comments from you shortly. John, were you going to say something?
Yes, I was just going to ask, you referenced other townships and what they've been doing, and feedback that you've managed to collect from those other townships and the way they carry this doors open forward. Is there anything there that you would single out to say, this is the reason why it's in the public interest to do it, and we would, in other words, if you make it available, they will come. People will come.
Oh, well, I guess
Who would you choose?
the purpose of bringing this to attention wasn't just under the assumption that if you do it, people will come. I think you do it regardless of whether people are coming or not, and you have to build upon those successes and change things. And you have to look and make things and rediscover your own kind of heritage to be able to offer it out. And again, you do it regardless of whether there is vast public response, and then you start understanding why. And I think Aurora is unique from a Markham. So you're not going to go and go, oh, Markham does it this way, we're just going to go and do what Markham does. That's a huge recipe for failure. And I don't think you look at it that way. I think you look at their event reports, and then you can put it on the table with ours. But you have to measure apples and apples, not apples and oranges. What I'm saying is we're not getting the data with ourselves to be able to even compare it to someone like a Markham. So I think at this point, unfortunately, that whole conversation is moot. I think what needs to happen is you need to form a committee, you need to go through the exercise, you need to build it back up, you need to build it up right. And then as you go through it, you need to collect the right data and you need to be asking the right questions. And then what you'll start seeing is more interest and availability from some of these people go, I want to get that on the next year. Okay, cool. What can we do? Right? Not rolling out everything and going, oh, why isn't this working?
So would you be interested in heading up a committee?
I'm not part of this. I'm not a member of your advisory committee, right? So this is what I was suggesting. The working group should be formed as a subcommittee of this committee. And from there, I think you can nominate and elect whoever you want. And from there, hopefully you'll get them.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments I have, and Mr. Watts / Chris, thank you so much for highlighting this on tonight's agenda. I think one of the factors that's caused absence of is we've gone through, I should have kept a list. We've gone through quite a number of heritage planners in a short period of time to kind of build a history and build a tradition within of this is what we did and these are the people that were helping and let's change this for next year, but then that heritage planner is not here next year. I think another factor that's messed things up is that we only meet every 2 months. We used to meet monthly. So sometimes when we're meeting now, it's not quite, but it just seems like catch up. Where did we leave off? And perhaps some repetition just to try to get back on track of some things. There just isn't the flow of continuity of discussion because there's been 2 months in between. That being said, I've got 2 or 3 doors open t-shirts in my closet or a drawer at home. I think previously there's been a small committee of helpers of some people. I don't know where they came from. I don't know if they're part of Shelley Ware's group or if they came out of the woodwork or it was advertised maybe for students to get community service hours. So Adam, I would ask, are we, this is June, our next meeting is not until August. Typically, the doors open for us has been, I think, mostly August, but there might have been at least one or more than one in July. Are we out of the question for this year, but we should smarten up and try to get our act together as best we can for next year? I'm wondering if it's a budget issue as well that didn't get brought up, and the mayor's asking for input for the budget. So I'm just wondering on timing and budget, and is this year realistic? But if it's not, let's not lose this, if the right word is impetus. I'm not sure if that's the right word. The momentum that is Chris has helped to build, and maybe we can do better than in the past.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, I'll try and touch on a number of topics that have been brought up, because I am familiar with Doors Open, as Dave mentioned, working it together years back, when I was with the town previously. And yeah, I mean, so the short answer is we do need council authorization. And as Chris also mentioned, Doors Open as a event does require, I believe it's $1,000 registration fee, the Ontario Heritage Trust. It requires a working group. And it requires that you have at least a minimum number of 10 sites, I believe. And that I think registration opens for the year starting in January. So we would require council authorization this fall to register by January to then hold it in 2025. Would be the course of action. But even backtracking a bit from that, it is about creating a working group. And you know, I also actually don't need to respond to the question, but I do have some questions back in the sense that our options open, just so the committee is even of a mindset of what may be available. This is through the Ontario Heritage Trust as Doors Open. Doors Open went digital during the pandemic, and we as the town have maintained a digital site. I understand that's not the in-person version. Some municipalities are morphing and coming back into the in-person. Right now, I believe it's 18 or 20 or so of the vast municipalities across the province. But yes, there's that uptake in getting back into the in-person event. The other option, and David, we spoke about this before too. Chris, your presentation kind of highlighted it. Dare I say, it's the best part is those walking tours and some of those grassroots heritage-led aspects. I pose this as a question. I just want to again say I'm pretty neutral because I respect the committee if we want to proceed and direct the council for authorization for the next year. But another option at this table is just doing an event ourselves, right? In the sense that it can be, David, we spoke about this. I mean, I don't want to take away from your idea because you do great walking tours. A Heritage Advisory Committee walking tour, Heritage Advisory Committee event, and weighing the pros and cons. That's something we can do. We don't need to go through the Ontario Heritage Trust. We can just approach it that way. And again, I'm impartial either way. I just want to present the facts, present information.
I guess another factor is if it's go through the Heritage Trust, you need time to spread the word that it exists to, yeah. So I would ask the committee, well, I see two things in my head. We could as a committee ask staff to ask council to let's make it happen for next year in 2025, but I don't want to necessarily throw out what might be possible for this year. But a large part of what might be possible for this year involves that guy at the end of the table, and some people can give walking tours and read from a script. Other people can give walking tours that are exciting and have some interest that grabs you, whether they are spooky tours or otherwise. And Dave is excellent at that. But I also think if to get some helpers to help make it happen for next year, we'd need time to involve kids in the local high schools. But and I would suggest that it's too much for one person heritage planner as an add-on. But I don't think it's too much if you've got enough helpers. So what would formalize, if I'm reading the room correctly, to do an official one for next year?
So through you, Mr. Chair, what you said is exactly it. It's about optimizing resources. It's about doing things like Chris said as well to have that working group committee and get a full suite of volunteers, summer students, and actual creative ideas, site selection, the whole 9 yards. In terms of timeline, so the Heritage Committee directs staff to proceed in preparing a report to council to authorize registration for Doors Open 2025. That can be done, let's say September, October. Council then, assuming they authorize that, we register in January. Even probably prior to the formal registration, we may want to speak about creating a working group. And that can branch out even beyond the Heritage Advisory Committee if that's desired, just to bring in additional assets as needed. And you, John, you mentioned chairing or whatever, that can all be figured out. And then it'd be registering in January, February, I believe is their timeline, and holding it at a date we select. I do recall the date required between April and October.
Do you need a motion?
Sure, well, I think the Heritage Committee can receive this delegation and direct or provide their make their comments. Or my apologies, yes, I think you indicate your position.
Are you thinking?
So,
Dave, did you have a question or were you making a motion?
No, I wanted to make a comment through you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, before,
Yeah,
in regards to, Mr. Watts had a slide that he said that he didn't know who made the post. I, however, do. And I was bothered by the comparison, like, or the reference that, kind of said, you know, the two birds. To me, I read that, it's like, well, town square is what's going on and there isn't enough to do other stuff. That really bothered me considering the source. Because the person who made this comment and didn't make doors open sounded like it was kind of the same old with the same sites and made reference to culture days, etc. Happens to be a person in the employ of a cultural partner, which bothers me. Secondly, you mentioned the walking tours. I'm not sure that I can throw any assistance to a walking tour. I've received some information recently that there is some talk about a group working with staff in regards to a walking tour at present, and it's not myself. I would have liked to have been asked if they were interested in working with myself, but I guess they've chosen to work with a group from outside of Aurora. So let's just say my warm and fuzzy for this event is waning, finding out that information. So, yeah, that's what I have to add.
Adam, are you aware of there already is planning for some walking tour this summer?
through you, Mr. Chair, no, not to my knowledge, and I will reiterate, we are the Heritage Committee.
Yeah,
If we want to do a walking tour, this is Heritage.
It's not through the Heritage Department, it's through another department. Or it's not through planning, it's through another department. And this is not based on just gossip, it's based on information shared with me to my face with some detail, including in our heritage area. Yeah, so. Anyway.
okay. Well, let's let me put that on hold just for a sec. Do we need a motion to request staff to move forward with making doors open happen in Aurora in 2025?
Mr. Chair, I think we have suggested wording, perhaps.
To receive the comments of the delegation, and that the comments, and similar to the other motions that we have, and that the comments of the delegation be received and referred to staff. And action as required.
I don't know if that's strong enough, because I don't know if the delegate was saying, let's do it in 2025.
Mr. Chair, that'd be the only option through that.
Yeah.
The formality.
Yeah. So will you interpret that in the staff report to council accordingly?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, I believe what I would take from this is the next step being a fall report to authorize council consider doors open. That includes registration and formation of the work.
And the motion that is basically on the floor now is sufficient.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Okay. Chris?
The only thing I wanted to just depart to that was at the very beginning, when you started with the minutes for this committee, there was mention to the Heritage Fund as part and parcel of the Patch House. When I gave a previous delegation, I was mentioning about the Heritage Fund to the committee. I wonder if there was some kind of stumbling block of trying to find finances. The Heritage Fund is designed for this committee and council to do these kind of activities. So I didn't see there being a financial barrier as the thing that stopped doors open. And because Shelley usually with her special events usually does stuff a year out, I was hoping that I was getting in early enough for next year to kind of make sure that there's enough racetrack. So maybe as you're crafting wording, it can hint at the fact that there is a funding source appropriate for a doors open launch for 2025. There's enough racetrack for it, and that staff can then start getting things fed into it to bring it back to your committee for considerations. Thanks.
Thank you. No, that's a good point about the funding. That was done with me. Cynthia?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just looking at the Richard Stouffville Doors Open Ontario website. And it says Doors Open Ontario presenting sponsor TD Bank TD Ready Commitment. Is there an opportunity for community sponsorship to help us run an event such as this? It seems like it.
You, Mr. Chair, I would have to run through Ontario Heritage Trust because we enter through this formal registration process. A lot of that authority is directed through the trust, right?
Okay.
So from what I recall, I may stand corrected, to be fair, is that the Ontario Heritage Trust wants to retain that control, quite honestly. They may have province-wide or event-wide sponsors like TV.
Okay.
On the municipal level, I do not believe that's available. I believe even marketing purposes all have to have that Ontario Heritage Trust logo, be vetted by them. I think it's pretty above board in that regard, and very strict, quite honestly, through them. I could stand corrected, so we could explore through that registration process, but that's my understanding.
So then this brings me to another question, Mr. Chair. What's the benefit of making it Doors Open Ontario versus making it just an Aurora version? Is there some sort of benefit other than it being more widely recognized?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I ultimately, honestly, I think that's a very good question. I think that is what you posed as a question earlier.
Right.
Doors Open does have the brand recognition, 100%. It is tied to, even we have our town website, but it has its own website, which you just saw there. It has a page, it has marketing assistance, I believe, or the formality of a working group, the ability to approach someone and say, hey, we are organizing Doors Open. Yeah, I mean, that may carry some weight to it. And then in terms of a more localized, so to speak, event, yeah, it's kind of what we spoke about previously in terms of whether it's geared more to like a historical walking tour as opposed to an actual Doors Open event.
Right.
Yeah, there's pros and cons.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if it hasn't happened for several years and we're trying to execute an event and also discern interest, then maybe running an Aurora-based event might be a good sort of bridge between not having done it for several years and jumping right back into Doors Open Ontario without maybe the very stringent regulations that seem to come from a Doors Open event. So I don't know, that's all I'm thinking.
Really, Mr. Chair, the only comment I would echo is kind of what you said, Bob, Mr. Chair, in terms of, it would have to be a team effort, quite frankly, and what you also do your walking tours, but it doesn't necessarily mean it almost runs a baby. Whatever this committee wants to see in that regard, or whatever, we have options.
I have a question for Chris. One of your opening slides was the cartoon that appeared in the Aurora. And I see there was a Scott Johnson, I think was the name of the cartoonist. Does Scott Johnson bring this up and recognize it, or was he approached by somebody to say, hey, you know, Aurora is missing out on something, and this is why the Auroran brought it to the attention of the public?
That's not a question I can answer. I'm not Scott Johnston, so I think you'd have to take that up with him. I don't know how he comes up with his card.
Right, well, this is one of the things, it obviously is very important, and it carried an awful lot of weight to see all these people are doing things, but Aurora, no, doors closed, chains and whatnot. So to me, when I looked at it, I thought, wow, you know, this needs to be changed.
Yeah, I think he has his ear to the ground quite well, especially with some of the poetry that he comes up over different things, different months through the year. Dave?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think part of the puzzle of that is I believe through Mr. Watts showing the two articles. One of them was much earlier than Scott Johnson's, where someone on the social media brought up doors open. I think it was, I hope they're gonna do it again. And then it didn't happen, and I believe Scott Johnson is part of that network, because I've seen him participate, and he's brought up. Secondly, I think where doors open for us is sort of paramount to promote it. I found over the years, a lot of the promotion of doors open is promoted within our borders. And I really don't think that's what doors open should really be the focus is. I spoke to Mr. Ramuno several times about this, and I said, you know, if we really want to make a home run with promoting our heritage, especially doors open, we should be down in the distillery district, down in the St. Lawrence Market, banging out cards and so on and so forth, and, you know, getting the people to get excited about it and being our words of, you know, a word of mouth on that. That's where I'm at on that is just, I think, one example I was excited to see, I'll throw it in now before information that if anybody is tuned in other than Councillor Weiss, the community garage sale is this Saturday. And the communications, I saw some promotion outside of Aurora's boundaries for that event. And I went, good, we're reaching beyond our boundaries, because now we're pulling in people, potentially a little bit of tourism maybe too. And the Auroran, for example, too, we forget Auroran gets dropped to our door, but they are online, and there's a network outside of in other communities that pick up the articles. And again, that reaches beyond our boundaries, and that's what I think we really need to do with partners for promotion is make sure we focused on outside first, because I've said before, and thanks to Councillor Weiss for bringing it up in council, I believe there's money in our heritage through tourism, and I don't think we're selling our stuff that well, and we need money in our coffers for all of our businesses and for our community. No ifs, ands, or buts. Thank you.
Very good. I remember being at the Church Street School doing a PowerPoint of postcards of Aurora, and a busload of people, I don't know, from Oshawa came in. Not necessarily a big bus, but they were from out of town, and they were all excited to get Aurora's doors open. So can we go with 2025 as previously discussed? And that you're satisfied with what Linda's going to have on paper for you to act on?
Yeah, to you, Mr. Chair, I will take a report. It's authorized doors open 2025. Seeking council's direction.
So now, do we want to discuss something, well, maybe it's under new business. Never mind. So we'll talk about potential for this year, if any, under new business. Sure. Okay. This year. Okay, thank you, folks, for your tolerance, diligence, input. Thank you, Mr. Watts, for once again opening eyes and ears. We need to move our seconder for the receipt of comments and delegate. Moved by Dave Hurd, seconded by John Green. All those in favor? Unanimous. If I'm not too excited here, we're on to 7.2. On our agenda, memorandum for manager, policy planning and heritage, re-establishment of a heritage grant program.
Yes.
So, Adam, I'll turn things over to you for enlightening us on this one.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So staff have been directed through council motion to develop a heritage grant program. In the establishment of this grant program, will be forthcoming. We're just in the initial stages right now. Staff are undertaking municipal best practice review, looking at other municipalities, see what they're doing, see what works, see what doesn't work. But at this stage, right at the early onset of development of this project, we want to consult directly with the Heritage Advisory Committee to get some initial feedback to help us in the development of this. You'll see specifically on page 2 of the memo, the bullets in particular discuss some of the measures and devices that can and cannot be included in the program. Again, with a desire to seek some comments from the Heritage Advisory Committee here to inform elements such as applicability of the program. We know generally speaking, it's going to apply to designated properties, and I think it's safe to say it will be town-wide, but if there's any comments to that regard from the Heritage Advisory Committee, potential of leveraging such a program for additional designations, eligibility on types of works, just very high level. I've seen other municipalities that, of course, provide grants for the actual physical restoration of, say, a heritage element, a porch, a gable, a trim, or some might also do it for physical reports and documentation and photo documenting some of those more report-based studies. I'm not saying that's what we can do, but it's an option, something to consider. And just generally speaking, what our application review process will be. My initial viewpoint in this would be that we already have heritage permits coming to us already through the Ontario Heritage Act, requirements to review heritage permits. A heritage grant would be a concurrent process to go with that heritage permit. Say someone has proposed this permit, there's also a grant potentially available to them based on those factors and eligibility, but the committee can then recommend approval as well as approval of a respective grant for that project. Those are some of my initial points, but again, there's no formal program at this point. We're just in the early stages of developing it. Once the program is drafted, again, anticipating probably over the next 3 to 4 months-ish, we will be coming back to the Heritage Committee with an actual document for you to review and mark up and comment once again. But just certainly looking at initial comments in this stage.
Thank you. Dave?
In regards to the program, and I've discussed this with staff before, Adam can verify that, I'm sure, about the some of the residents who own heritage homes, you know, have expressed to me their challenges doing without aid to, you know, keep their home up. From an aesthetic point of view, I think the most important, and I'll give you a reference, a location on Wellington Street. I won't, out of respect to the owner, but Adam and I spoke about it. The facade, the front is starting to look a little bit shabby. And I think that if fund is to develop, I think it should be a little more specific to start with facades as a priority, because aesthetics, I believe, especially with heritage, is everything. Especially if you want to, you know, draw in tourism, you don't want people coming by and going, "Oh, that's pretty gross." You know, I'm not saying you cover up what's at the back, but that seems to be where we see a lot of the heritage homes. It starts to look
not a lot of them, but when I say when they start looking in a little bit disrepair, we notice it in the facade, in the front. Which generally a lot of times means, shutters, painting, things like that. Which I've noticed a lot of places, it's not a lot to get them looking shiny and polished again. So that's my point.
Good, thank you.
I have a question that has nothing to do with what we're doing. I need to go to the bathroom. Is there a protocol for that, or can I just get up and go? Thank you. Wanted to make.
You're not
sure.
allowed. Then push us.
Okay, thanks. That push-ups, I'll do when I get back. Thank you.
Dave, John?
Yes, through Mr. Chair, I think this is an excellent idea, and I believe, as David pointed out, one particular property that's looking shabby, and if they were able to participate and receive some money to spruce up the front of their building to make it more attractive, word will still soon spread around to other people that have similar properties and cannot afford to keep it up to what it should be looking like. And if they could say, oh, if we can apply for this and we get some money and we will go ahead and do it, I think the word would spread very rapidly, and the town would benefit as a result of this, because of the buildings that look shabby and suddenly they look really good. And it depends, of course, on how big the fund is. And is there any research done on what it might cost for the average uplift, as it were?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. So there's a couple of ways, again, through my initial review of how the program could work. It's either a percentage-based grant allocation or a capped fixed amount. So to expand on both of those, so say we have a proposal, and I like your idea there about the facade. I think that's a very good point. Let's say there's a proposal, and for hypothetical sake, it costs $10,000. The committee could say through this program, okay, X percentage. The one potential risk to that is that if we say a fixed percentage on any given proposal, then you may have some applicants that come in with very expensive, very large scale, 6-figure proposals, and then you're stuck at that 5% for everyone. That may not necessarily work. Whereas the common approach I see, John, to answer your question a bit more directly, is where municipalities have a capped amount. So they'll always say maybe a baseline percentage capped at 5 or 10 or 15,000. As we pass that. So that's the short thing. A long way.
Yep.
Dave?
I just want to throw in a little caveat, so it's totally clear and on the record here. Adam and I have had this discussion. I got to give a real thumbs up to a lot of the majority of the heritage owners in this town. Especially, as I said to Adam, what's happened to Wellington Street and Mosley Street and some of those areas, we should be very proud of the people who have taken on a heritage home as a responsibility. I wish I could own and afford one, and I never will. Kudos to them for what they're doing so far, and hopefully we can help the residents who own heritage homes do more.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I'm in different, but through Mr. Chair, can I just ask a question? Because David, speaking of the facades, one question that I even thought of in my head was commercial versus residential. And I'm just posing that at large here. That'd be my question. If you have a specific, even the memo spoke to geographies, does that Young Wellington corridor become more of a priority versus others, or whatever the case may be? Posing that as a question to the committee.
Through you, Mr. Chair, in some of those areas, you have a double-edged sword because they're zoned as residential and commercial.
Right.
And some of them are being used as residents where they have zoning that could be, could prop them up as a boutique or something, which we're not taking advantage of that. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the strategy is going to be, how do we filter or encourage, or is there a limited amount? Is it an amount up to, or do we ask that, if they're gonna work on a project that the town puts in 2,500, if they put it in 25, I don't know what the answer is. But I'm concerned about potentially the competitiveness about this, and I really don't think we want that. I don't think we want to restrict too much, but it is a double-edged sword when you're dealing with business versus residential. That's why they pay you the big bucks to do this.
That's why we're developing the program, but I need to hear, we need to hear.
Rob, what do you go ahead?
I would say that percentages with a cap is definitely, it would be a good option. And maybe to categorize the restoration, let's say, you know, painting would be one category. But brickwork, you know, myself just going through it. I bought a heritage home for the love of the heritage home, not, it was very costly, but let's say like, you know, a brick restoration on just one little area can cost you upwards of $10,000 very easily. You know, and I don't know if the town wants to be on the hook for, you know, for everybody's restoration. I mean, we buy the heritage homes because we love the heritage homes and we want to keep the heritage homes looking nice, but
Through you, Mr. Chair, I like that idea too, where, it's again, totally hypothetical. You know, something like minor work or paint, we suggested maybe like a 1%, the bricks, 2%, facades, then 3%, so that way you're categorizing them. Some of that we could evaluate, we could look at as well. And I think to your response in terms of the actual commitment level, there would always be that cap, right? So regardless of whatever the owner may want to put in above and beyond, there would be most likely that cap threshold.
His hand is up. Councillor Weiss, I see your hand. Thanks to Linda. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. I don't want to interfere. You're having a great conversation here, but just a couple of things on this topic. First of all, I think we have to treat heritage as an asset, not a liability. And so that means that, you know, when you have an asset, you have to take care of that asset. And if the asset happens to be in private hands, then it's a little dicey that way. But getting around to this cap and all the rest of it, I think that if we have a long-term plan, 5-10 years, where a certain amount of money is going to be put into a pot, so to speak, and once that's been depleted for the year, then they wait for the next one and the next one and the next ones, because we're hoping the heritage is going to last for a while, and it might be a lot easier to budget that way because we do multi-year budgeting now with the town. The other thing that I'm really happy Adam brought up was the whole notion of the commercial properties, and thanks for Mr. Hurd for making his comments about it as well, because we have this notion of a streetscape and a change in the streetscape, particularly in the BIA. And I think it's important that we learn a little bit more about that, and that certainly it goes through heritage when whatever is being proposed is being proposed. Because I recall, I don't know, 15 years ago, the Newmarket had the same kind of a thing for their main street, where grants were provided to improve facade. And David is quite right there when he's talking about people, their first view is often the exterior of a building, and it leads to the storytelling that's on the inside of it. So I just wanted to leave those kinds of comments in place for this. I'm in full support of this program, and I'll leave it to all the rest of you bright people and others that can figure out how to budget for it and what's eligible and what isn't eligible. But I think it's the right thing to do for sure.
Thank you, Ron. Dave?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity here through, we do have sponsorships, you know, sponsorships was mentioned out earlier. Whether we could reach out to local businesses, for example, like Home Hardware and Home Depot, and an offer is available also to the heritage property owners who could get, say, wholesale pricing for paint, for stucco, for whatever they need.
because they are on a heritage list.
Great idea.
It's a good idea.
John?
Through you, Mr. Chair, picking up on David's comments, the Aurora Historical Society did or does take advantage of that fact that they are a well-known group, and they do go to Home Depot, they go to Home Hardware, and they do get a reduced cost on items or free items given to them because of their position within the town. And so that's something that I believe could be asked of the local merchants. And one other thing is, and maybe Adam can answer this, if people are some of businesses versus private people, businesses, if they do improve the facade, etc., can they claim that money on their taxes by improving the building that they're operating from?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I believe so. I believe they would still, whether this grant program is in place or not, there would be still mechanisms as a corporation
Okay.
to seek relief from the federal level.
Yeah.
Cynthia?
Hey, Mr. Chair, so the question that I have is, we were talking about facades, so what determines whether a facade is in enough disrepair to repair it? Because what I'm wondering is if somebody just decides they want to paint their shutters a different color, that obviously would not be disrepair, that would be personal preference. So would there be some sort of conversation that would happen? Obviously, there'd be an application process, but would the town send somebody to look at whatever it is that the homeowner is claiming they need to fix in order to determine that in fact that is a valid request?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, good question. The kind of simplified answer to that is that there would actually be an agreement required.
Okay.
So legally speaking, we would have to detail, there'd be a unique agreement for every, at least this is how I envision at this early stage. That details, okay, I, Adam, owner of X property, commit to doing X work, receiving X grant, and then being inspected at the end of it. Something to that effect.
Right.
And then in speaking to the actual elements of the property themselves, this is why, again, the grant program itself would be geared to the designated properties. Because that's where there's the designation bylaw registered on title, we have the key indications of what the key exterior elements are codified in that designation bylaw that says, what are those elements? Yeah, 90% being on the facade in most cases, that we want to see restored or we want to see protected over the long term as that key cultural heritage asset. And then that's a good question too about general upkeep, or let's even say cosmetics versus a dire need for restoration.
Right.
I think that's something that we probably have to build into categorization as well, and how we may want to filter out based on that.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of Noel's Butcher Shop that we talked about last meeting. Obviously, their facade is in need of repair. But that's a more pressing concern than say, somebody may be living on a side street where, maybe the paint needs to be updated or the siding is a bit faded, but it's not an eyesore. So it's a very sort of gray area, right? That you need people to determine and assess need, I suppose.
Right. Mr. Chair, the one thing I said early on too is that I think the most streamlined approach at this stage is on the intake of the heritage permit to also have the grant be considered concurrently. But I think another element or another layer to this program would be the actual outreach to say, hey, consider designation of your property because it's happening. So that's something that as a committee, we should be mindful of. That this program, well, as I as staff look into developing this, and I may be focused on caps and financials or agreements, there's a bigger picture here about trying to encourage designation and encourage the marketing.
Good. David?
Me, Mr. Chair, I could be wrong on this, but based on the number of times I've seen historic buildings that are designated or may have historic significance and aren't designated as yet. Unfortunately, many of these buildings have been targets of graffiti and graffiti and tagging quite frequently, and that is on a burden of the owner. And I'll tell you, knowing some of the small business owners, in the downtown area, that some of them, I can tell you, because I've spoken to them directly, they don't have time to be going out and painting, and they gotta hire somebody to do it, and they're having to repeat the process. So I'm wondering where that would fall in with this possibly, because it's another part of upkeeping a heritage building, and I don't know why people are targeting our heritage building with, you know, with art or non-art, because it's not their property, you know, and they're burdening the owner of the property.
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's honestly a very good question. Yeah, I don't know if this grant, we have the option to make this grant available in situations like that. But I admittedly will say it's a bit of a gray area. Because that owner doesn't need to come in for a heritage permit, because there's no architectural feature that they're altering, so to speak. But I get what you're saying, it's a burden on the owner. So we could look to expand it in a manner like that, as this community sees fit, as council sees fit. I'm also still in the back of my head thinking of what other options may be available, but you're right. It is mostly burdened off to the owner. So, yeah, this could open up in that regard, but then I just cautiously also say, not saying that's not a priority, but then it goes back to this point about having that priority in terms of what elements, or do we want to make it about preserving key heritage elements, architectural elements, or that as well. I appreciate it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I also think though that there's an opportunity to maybe build into this some sort of emergency
Yeah,
cushion funding, right? A contingency fund, because, you know, I think David is correct. When you've got this beautiful heritage building and it's being defaced, it's in everybody's best interest if that building is properly maintained and is presented in its best possible light. And that kind of, you know, that act obviously diminishes its value. So maybe to build in some sort of contingency, emergency fund for that type of repair might be prudent.
Yeah, to be sure, that can definitely be done. I guess that is a good point. I think just as we structure the program, we would just have to do something exactly like that, have a recognized plot. Going back to even Councilor Reese's point, if we have a fixed number for the year or 5 years, whatever it is, but then some set of that being geared towards those non-heritage permit types of work.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, this might be a double-edged sword when you think about it. If you go past the Knowles Butcher Shop right now, you'll see what the facade looks like. And if you look at the alleyway, it's not art, I'll tell you, but right there. And it's been there for, I think, at least a couple of weeks now. So there's a double-edged sword right there. Not only does the place look like it needs a makeover, but it's got that, you know, in the walkway. So, yeah.
Good to know. A couple of comments. I'm just looking at page 14 and 15, not that you need to turn to it. Suitability of the program to leverage the designation of additional properties. I say yes. Application submission and review process, review and approval by the Heritage Advisory Committee. Just that review, yes, but we don't have the power to approve, but I don't think that's what you meant there anyhow. On page where the motion appears on page 15, I'm curious to know, and I'm not expecting an answer right now, just whether the vote was in unanimous support from council, but the first whereas preserving and promoting our town's heritage is of paramount importance to the community. If that was supported by all members of council, that's wonderful news. I wonder how much money's in the pot, and I know you can't answer that. That's just me reading the article. I look forward to the town paying for my new roof. That's great. But on the serious side, I would say I think it's better to start with tight guidelines. I think it's easy. It reminds me of discipline in the classroom. I think it's easier to be tough at the beginning and then ease up as the year goes on. I think you start small and have tight guidelines, and perhaps in the second year, more is allowed. But just to see how the money goes and that kind of thing. That's for me. Any other comments on this item? I think we have the motion on the floor. We don't have the motion on the floor. So there's a 7.2. As printed in the guideline memorandum that we receive the memorandum and that our comments be received and referred to staff, to paraphrase. Moved by Dave, or moved by Dave, seconded by Cynthia. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Wonderful. Motion passes. Motion carried. I think we're on to, I'm not sure the difference between informal items and new business, actually. Informal items. But did I read that wrong? Informational. Oh, dear. Must be past 9 o'clock. No, yeah.
Is that, Mr. Chair, is that like announcements or what is that?
Informational items. Let me just see on the polls notes here. Does that come straight from Adam?
Yeah.
So, staff, Adam, do we have any informational items for this evening?
Listed, right?
In that section.
Okay, okay, we have none. Okay. We're on to number 9, new business. Before I open the floor for other items, I'm wondering if we could perhaps finish our earlier almost discussion on whether there is any, not doors open from in Aurora, but Adam, you had suggested perhaps a walking tour or something from this committee.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, like, David, you and I have spoken about it. I don't want to put it all on you, certainly, because I've also offered if someone wants to speak about interesting stories and I speak about built heritage or whatever the circumstances may be, I'm open to anything. I just want to pose that as a consideration.
Appreciated. David, what's your feeling on such?
What, on a walking tour?
Yeah,
So Adam and I have extensively talked. I don't want to sound like a whiner, but I am going to whine a little bit about my concern with this. So Adam asked me if I could come up with a walking tour some time ago. And I said, you know, I've been working on a tour that is date specific, that happens to be in August. And I have spent, I've lost count, years and years trying to dig into historical information that others have not touched upon. And I'm talking, it's been hundreds of hours, no joke. My concern is now I go out there and I know that there is potentially another group working in the wings. I've already worked extensively on designing a tour that I received no financial benefit from whatsoever. And a lot of the parts of the tour I've worked on have just been duplicated. And this is my concern now. This tour that I've recently designed, I'm very concerned about protecting all my efforts in intellectual property at this time. That's my concern. And if I had written a book, I'd be okay. But I have not documented, nor do I have time at the present to get it all into print and say, hey, I'm an author. This is, you know, and I can go, look, you stepped on my toes. That's my concern. And like I said, I'm not just blowing smoke. There are other groups right now wanting to come into our community and do heritage programming and being encouraged through or meeting with staff members, not making it up. It came from their mouths. That's my concern at this present time.
Adam?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, if I may then, just ask a question, David, like if the motion's already there and we're all focused on doors open, then that'd be something you'd be willing to do, doors open 2025, and we set our sights on that, we go through the motions and we're all
through you, Mr. Chair, you'd have to ask me in 2025.
Fair enough.
Cynthia?
Sorry, maybe this is a stupid question, but if this rogue group is coming through the town and it's not coming from here, do we know where it's coming from? Is there a way that there can be a conversation about why this is happening?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've already had conversations with, I don't think that conversation would go anywhere. It's just, they're gonna do their thing and I'm gonna do my thing. And, it's free enterprise. I mean, I don't think we have any right. I have a problem when people contact me and say, we'd like you to hand us a bunch of your stories so we can do our thing. I have a problem with that, and that's how this all started. But, you know, no, I don't believe there's a conversation that, can be had, you know. My thing I will say through is, a lot of the things that I do, I'm an individual who does this because of alleged passion. I'm not an organization, I'm not a not-for-profit. And because of that, I've been kind of, you know, and I'm not saying it, the system has, you know, groups and organizations seem to get priority. I'm not one. So I don't know what to say about that. I just, as I said, I'm out of all the things that I have created so far, other than working so hard for like 20 years on a ghost tour. I would say this research effort I'm more proud of than anything else I've done in the community. And I really want to protect that. And because I don't believe I can do a tour, what I'm planning on doing is as soon as I can get through this summer with all the bookings I have, most of them volunteering, I'm going to write this down and protect it.
John?
Through you, Mr. Chair, David and Adam, if a rogue group, if I can call them that, suggest that they'd like to do something like this, and David has an idea that he's put forward, for example, this evening and previous evenings, if the council and the staff sanctioned David and said, go ahead, we give you permission. If these road groups come in and try and copy this, is there any way that we can stop them? Or if it's not officially supported by the town, what gives them the authority to come in and do this?
Mr. Chair, I mean, I don't know what this road group is. I'm not involved in it. I don't know the legalities. I'm not all that familiar, of course. One idea that came to my mind, ironically, was the benefits of doors open, and that formal structure is perhaps just that. You know, in the sense that your walking tour becomes an event codified through that formal registered doors open Aurora event. I don't know if that is to your liking or not either, David, but that's something that it's in writing, it's there, I don't know, but yeah, that's pretty much all the feedback I can provide, because I don't really know the details.
We'll ask David in January 2025.
Just a comment through you, Mr. Chair. Sadly, in today's society, I think there are many, I'm not saying it's this group, but there's many people lacking ethics. Just taking things and doing their own, it's almost like society, part of it has taken an every man or every person for themselves attitude. We know that. You know, I don't think there's anything we can really do to protect, you know, and it's disappointing because I can tell you the date that we had selected is significant to our community. It would help a lot of things. And I'm, like I said, I'm very, very concerned, and I don't just want to hand my information to others. And do I believe that that will happen, that somebody will just run with it? They already have. It's already happened. And, you know, there's, like I said, if I can give any advice to somebody who's going to do something this, write a book first. Like, seriously.
So, through Mr. Chair, if I can maybe some sort of recommendation or suggestion here is that. I guess over the coming months, David, if you want to continue dialoguing with me, if you do have a change of mind, and you want to pursue a walking tour of any sort or some sort of event. I think that's something that just even for the sake of emailing to the community members, if something does formalize, obviously this wouldn't be to the scale of say a doors open or marketing or things like that. Tied to the Saturday at the farmer's market or whatever it may shape up to be, that's something we can continue to dialogue on and see how it pans out. I'm game if you are type of thing, and we can just roll with it. If that's okay with you.
Sounds good. Just leave it at that and see how.
Yep.
How the wind blows. Thank you. Other items for new business? Cynthia?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to circle back to the school project.
Oh, yes.
So I'd very much like to set up a meeting with you, Adam, to go through, maybe make a list of properties that we would like to start the pilot with. And work out some of those details. I think we decided that we, at this point, did not need a working group. And that we would sort of pilot it with a small group and then see moving forward if that changed. So I can email you, we can figure out a time that works, but I would like to be able to do that sooner than later.
So, through Mr. Chair, hear me anytime. And,
Okay.
I forgot if we scoped to a specific geography or not, but.
No, that's what I would like to
yeah,
talk about.
we-
Yeah. Okay, and I'm thinking we'll start with, I'm thinking 10 properties is probably ambitious enough to start with. But certainly open to suggestions. I was thinking Petch House is one because we heard a lot about them, but maybe others might have different opinions about places that might be more historically significant. Noel's Butcher Shop might be another one that we want to start with, given all the restoration that's required there. But certainly open to feedback. I would guess it would be in the heritage area that we'd be focusing on.
Through Mr. Chair, if we want to maybe set up a list and circulate to the rest of the.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, because others definitely know more than I do about that. So,
Sounds good.
okay,
Thank you, Cynthia.
no problem.
David?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm gonna kind of put two of my things together under new business, and hopefully I don't lose anybody. I want to bring forward a point in regards to, it was mentioned at council and through staff in regards to, I was at council on this past Tuesday when the many position, multi-hat wearing former Mayor Jeffrey Daw was at council discussing the concerns for the AHS and the upkeep of the Hillary House. It was brought up, and I want to sort of a preemptive strike here, bring forward, it was brought up that the staff would engage, or the public would be engaged for input in regards to the Hillary House and the situation. I hope that when staff does that, that openness and historical information, even regarding the past, in how we arrived at this situation with Hillary House, and also included maybe some history in regarding to our Aurora Museum, which is connected to this history. So I'm just hoping and praying again that the conversation will include not just the present situation, but how we arrived at the destination that, as of right now, the Hillary House has challenges, and we've had challenges with our museum for the last, my goodness, I think it's been 20 years. And yes, there is a connection, and I think that should be discussed. Hillary House is a National Historic Site. I hope one day the Aurora Pet Cemetery, Adam and staff and the public is aware that I think I've been advocating since 2013, I believe it is, for the pet cemetery to be preserved, to be, to be restored, and to be open to the public. That was 2013. We're now at 2024. And I have extensively volunteered there. And yes, there has been a lot of work done to do with stone restoration, identification, et cetera. But my feeling about the pet cemetery is it's been over 10 years. And I really don't think we're as far as along as we should be with that project. I'm very frustrated that, Town Square is banging its way, and yes, it's 2 years over delayed. But I'm sorry, I'm gonna speak it from my heart on this one. I don't believe the pet cemetery is given its due attention with funding and with, moving it along. I believe that the connection between not just potential National Historic Site and National Historic Site, I believe one of the main things with those two properties, I'll say, is security and safety. And I think we know with Hillary House, I was just there on Saturday and had a look extensively at the building. If you look at facades, there's a lot of work that's needed. It's a beautiful structure. I don't think the entire fund should be used for this. But I would like to make comment, maybe a recommendation, that a portion of the funding from our Heritage Fund is as soon as possible directed to the Hillary House National Historic Site and the Aurora Pet Cemetery to deal with as a priority security and safety for those two sites. The Pet Cemetery, I know, is in need of fencing. The Hillary House, I'm sure, could use whatever it needs to make sure that the property, again, is safe and secure. And I just think, what is more important than something that's been designated at a federal level, or something potentially, it's already designated provincially, the Pet Cemetery, correct, Adam? And hopefully it'll move forward, but I do believe these places deserve some attention. And I think some of the funding should be directed to move things along with the Pet Cemetery. And Hillary House needs help. Let's get going on it now.
If I could just add on to that, I haven't looked recently, so I don't know to what extent or if it's been fixed, but I was told by a former president of the Historical Society that some car ran into the fence at the front of the house. And I know when I was on the board of the society, it was quite an ordeal and cost involved with Parks Canada, and I don't remember all of the details, but repairing the fence was a hassle. So I support David's comments in all aspects for what he has just said. In terms of safety and security. John, you had your hand up. No? Okay.
No, I could expand upon what's been happening.
Yeah.
As I'm on the board of AHS, and what David says is correct. The house needs money to keep it livable, if you will, and bring it up to certain standards. But money is always difficult to get. In fact, the funds that are raised by many of the programs that AHS puts on goes directly into keeping Hillary House livable, if you will. And the money should be used to actually expand the Aurora Historical Society's reach and programs and so forth, but a lot of it is focused on keeping the house. Well, I'll give you an example. It was for a number of years in November when the rains used to come. One would walk down into the basement, and at the last two steps of going into the basement, you'd get splash, because the whole basement was flooded, knowing that the basement walls were fieldstone and not like today's poured concrete. And so it cost $50,000 just to try and install a mechanism, if you will, where this water would be directed to some sump areas, pumped out, and the walls waterproof so it wouldn't happen again. But there's $50,000 just to get the basement going. And one of the benefits, of course, is that from a storage point of view, now things could be stored down there because it was dry, whereas prior to that, one couldn't store it. Also, the things like the central heating gas furnace was at risk of being doused by the water rising, etc. So it was something that had to be done, and a lot of the funds, for example, that were generated by the annual ball went towards that kind of thing. And I know that the town does give an annual gift, if you will, donation to AHS for Hillary House, but by today's standards, it's very little, and they should be looked upon to give more. But that's just my personal opinion.
David?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, is there or are you aware of any municipalities or who have done heritage fundraising or committees that focus on writing grants to support our heritage, either programming or keeping it maintained? Are you aware of anything like that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, quite honestly, off the top of my head, no. That, you know, some examples I can think of are when they are tied to, say, a museum facility and it's a well organized structure that is running a campaign, maybe something like that. I can't necessarily verify, but I'm thinking like the Mark Museum, or maybe the Grand examples of Beacon, but I can't pinpoint an exact example. It's okay.
I think this is a true statement, but I might be wrong. That most or many National Historic Sites that exist in Ontario are financially supported and managed or run by the municipalities.
Mr. Chair, that's correct. So Parks Canada, federal designation, quote unquote. And I put designation, quote unquote, because that designation is not like the designation that we're known for under the Ontario Heritage Act. Parks Canada designation is totally honorific. It comes, I'll put it bluntly, no support to my similar understanding.
And just to back to an earlier comment from David, I don't want to see the heritage funds depleted for the sake of Hiller House or the pet cemetery. I agree that a fence around the pet cemetery is overdue, and more care and concern being given in that direction. I have a different view for heritage for Hillary House. So I don't know how this fits, but since it's an item we're discussing, I would hope that in and I don't know Robin's title, but if she's going to interview residents for feedback, I hope David, John, and I could be included in her resident survey.
Robin McDougall, Director of Community Services.
Yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I recall that report also stipulating that she'll be coming back to the Heritage Committee specifically. As just for our knowledge as well, any alterations that occur at the Hillary House or the pet cemetery for that matter, since they're both designated properties, technically speaking, require heritage permits as well. Bare minimum. But above and even beyond that, I think that report would stipulate that she says heritage.
Okay.
That's part of the consultation process.
Thank you. Any other business, new business items? for this evening? Okay. All right. Thank you all. Item 10 on our agenda. From my school board experience, I wish that I knew how that ran, but yes, I don't know that we always need a seconder but could we have a movement for adjourning this meeting? Cynthia, seconded by John. And I'm going to assume we all support that.
Opposed.
So Rocco, sometimes they go longer, sometimes they go shorter.
We had one that was
Enjoyable.
half an hour once, remember? That was very
Yeah, I'll see what I can do.
No